Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Fluency Unleashed, where we dive deep into the stories that shape our speech and communication. I'm Sarah, your co host for today.
And I'm Alex. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we've got a pretty special episode for you. We're talking about something that's super close to my heart: fluency in speech and how to overcome the struggles of improving it.
That's right. This is a topic that hits home for so many of us. Whether it's public speaking, having smooth conversations, or just finding the right words at the right time, it's a journey.
Absolutely. And today, we're doing something a bit different. I'll be sharing a personal story about my own struggles with fluency and how I worked to overcome them. Hopefully, if you're listening, it might resonate with some of the things you're facing too.
I'm excited for this, Alex. Your story is going to inspire a lot of people out there. So let's dive right in.
Alex's story, The Struggle Begins.
All right, here we go. So, growing up, I had always struggled with fluency. And by fluency, I mean not just stuttering or anything like that, but just finding the right flow when I spoke. My words felt choppy, like I couldn't get them to align with my thoughts. I remember in school, especially during presentations, I'd get so nervous, it was like my brain would just freeze and I'd fumble through my sentences. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't know what I wanted to say, I knew it. But saying it smoothly, that was a whole other battle.
I can imagine. And for people who don't struggle with fluency, it might seem like something small, but it can really impact your confidence, right?
Exactly. It was more than just speaking. It was how it made me feel about myself. Every time I stumbled over words, it felt like I was being judged by my peers, my teachers, and especially by myself. I remember thinking, why can't I just say what I want to say without messing it up? It became this huge mental block.
What about social settings? Did it affect you there as well?
Oh, totally. Social settings were a nightmare. I'd avoid certain situations altogether because I was afraid I'd embarrass myself. Parties, group conversations, even just talking to new people, it all felt like a challenge. I think what made it worse was that people would interrupt or finish my sentences for me, thinking they were helping. But it made me feel like I was too slow, like I wasn't good enough to keep up with the conversation.
That sounds rough. It's like a cycle of self doubt that just keeps feeding itself.
Exactly. And here's the thing: the more you doubt yourself, the worse it gets. The pressure to speak fluently actually makes it harder to speak fluently. It was this constant loop. The fear of messing up made me mess up even more.
So, what was the turning point? When did things start to change for you?
Well, there wasn't one single moment, but a series of small ones. I think the first real shift happened when I started reading about other people who struggled with speech. I remember coming across this article about a public speaker who had a similar issue when they were younger. They talked about how they trained their brain to slow down and focus on the message, not the fear of stumbling.
That's interesting. So, it was more about mindset than technique?
Yeah, mindset was a huge part of it. But there were also practical techniques that I picked up along the way. One of the first things I learned was to embrace silence. I used to hate pauses. I thought they made me sound unsure or awkward. But in reality, pauses give you time to breathe, to gather your thoughts, and to slow things down.
That's so true. Pausing can be powerful, even though we often think we need to fill every second with words.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, when you pause, people usually don't even notice. It's just in your head that it feels like an eternity. But in real time, it's just a second or two. And that's okay.
So, you started to focus on pausing. What else helped you along the way?
Another huge thing was recording myself. I hated the idea of it at first. But when I started recording my voice and playing it back, I could hear the things I wanted to improve. It was like looking in a mirror for your speech. At first, it was cringy, listening to your own voice. But it really helped me pinpoint where I was rushing or mumbling. I started practicing speaking slowly, enunciating my words more, and being intentional about how I was delivering my message.
That's a great tip. It's tough listening to yourself at first, but you learn so much from it.
For sure. And another thing I started doing was reading out loud. Not just books, but articles, even social media posts, just to get comfortable with hearing my voice in different contexts. I'd focus on slowing down, making sure each word had its space, and it really started to help. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it built up my confidence.
I've heard a lot of people recommend reading out loud for fluency improvement. It's like building a muscle, right? The more you practice, the better it gets.
Exactly. And that's what it felt like. At first, it was hard, like going to the gym for the first time. But over time, it got easier. And I started to notice that in conversations, I was pausing less and feeling less anxious about speaking.
Did you ever work with a coach or a speech therapist? Or was this mostly self guided?
I did actually work with a coach for a bit. They helped me focus on breathing techniques, which I hadn't even thought about before. It turns out a lot of my speech issues were connected to shallow breathing. I'd rush through my words because I wasn't giving myself enough breath support. So I started doing exercises to control my breathing, and that made a big difference.
That's a great point. So much of speech comes down to physical aspects like breathing that we don't even think about. It's not just about the words themselves.
Exactly, and it's funny because once you start focusing on your breath, everything else sort of falls into place. It calms your nerves too, which is a big part of fluency. If you're calm, your words come out smoother.
I can see how that would make a huge difference. So let's say someone listening right now is struggling with fluency, like you did. What would be your top pieces of advice for them?
Great question. First, I'd say don't rush yourself. Give yourself permission to take your time. Pauses are your friend. Second, record yourself. It's uncomfortable at first, but it's one of the best ways to see where you can improve. Third, practice reading out loud. It helps build up your speech muscles. And finally, if you can, work with a coach or therapist. They can give you tools you might not even know you need, like breathing exercises.
That's great advice, Alex. I think people often forget that fluency is something you can work on and improve. Just like any other skill, it doesn't define you, and it doesn't have to hold you back.
Exactly. And it's a journey, you know? You don't go from struggling to fluent overnight. It's about progress, not perfection. And I'm still working on it. But now I feel more in control of my speech. And that's the real win.
That's so powerful. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Alex. I think it's going to help a lot of people who are on their own journey to improve their fluency.
And we're back. So, in the first half, I shared my story of struggling with fluency and the steps I took to improve it. But, Sarah, I know you have a story to share too about someone close to you who had their own journey with speech fluency.
Yeah, actually, it's about my younger cousin, Emily. She had a very different kind of challenge, but I think a lot of people will relate to it in some way.
Emily, yeah, I remember you mentioning her before. She's the one who was super shy as a kid, right?
Exactly. Emily was the quietest kid you could imagine. She wasn't just shy, she had a really tough time speaking in general, especially in social situations. Growing up, we'd have family gatherings, and while the rest of us would be chatting away, Emily would just sort of shrink into the background.
So, was her struggle more about anxiety or was it about fluency issues like what I went through?
It was a mix, actually. Her anxiety played a huge role, but even when she did want to speak, she would hesitate. Her words would come out jumbled, or she'd second guess herself mid sentence. You could see her mind racing, but the words never flowed the way she wanted. And because of that, she became even more anxious about speaking in general.
That sounds tough. Did she have any specific incidents where it became a real problem for her?
Yeah. One time, she had to do a school presentation when she was about 12. She'd worked really hard on it, memorized everything. But when she got up in front of the class, it was like her brain just froze. She could barely get a sentence out. I remember she came home that day in tears, completely devastated. She kept saying, I knew what I wanted to say, but my mouth wouldn't let me.
That's heartbreaking, especially for a kid. The frustration of knowing you've got the knowledge but feeling like you can't express it.
Exactly. And after that incident, she started avoiding anything that involved speaking. She wouldn't raise her hand in class, even if she knew the answer. She wouldn't talk much to people outside of our family. It was like she lost all confidence in her voice.
It's amazing how one bad experience can snowball like that, where it makes you afraid to even try again.
Totally. And for a while, we didn't know what to do to help her. My aunt and uncle thought it was just a phase, but I knew it was more than that. So I started to work with her. Nothing formal, just as a big cousin trying to help out.
What kind of things did you do with her?
It started really small. At first, I just made her feel comfortable talking to me one on one without any pressure. We'd have these little conversations, and I would encourage her to take her time. If she stumbled or hesitated, I'd wait for her to finish, and I never interrupted. That was a big thing for her because a lot of people, thinking they were helping, would try to finish her sentences for her.
I can relate to that. It makes you feel even slower, like you're not capable of getting your thoughts out on your own.
Exactly. So, I made it a point to be patient and just let her find her own pace. And once she got more comfortable talking to me, we started playing games that required her to speak more. Like we'd do role playing, where we pretended to be characters from her favorite books, or we'd play 20 questions, where she had to come up with different answers on the spot. It was fun. And because it didn't feel like practice, she loosened up a bit.
That's such a great approach. Making it fun instead of this stressful thing she had to get right.
Yeah, it helped. After a few months, I saw small changes. She wasn't rushing her words as much, and she started to speak a little more confidently around family members. But the real breakthrough came when my aunt enrolled her in a local drama club.
Drama club? That sounds like the last thing someone with a speech struggle would want to do.
That's what I thought too. But my aunt had this idea that if Emily could act like someone else, she might feel less pressure. And it actually worked, because when she was playing a character, it wasn't Emily speaking. She could almost detach herself from her own fear of being judged.
Wow, that's such an interesting way to tackle it. It gave her a new perspective on how to communicate.
Yeah, and it wasn't an overnight fix. The first few times she got on stage, she still struggled. But the thing is, she didn't give up. She kept going, and slowly, her confidence grew. The drama teacher was amazing, too. She was patient, encouraging, and made sure Emily knew it was okay to mess up.
It sounds like she had the perfect environment to grow in, a mix of support, patience, and the right kind of challenge.
Exactly. And as she got more involved in drama, her speech fluency outside of it started to improve as well. She wasn't perfect, but she stopped hesitating as much. The pauses that used to paralyze her became more natural. She learned how to breathe through them, how to own them instead of being afraid of them.
It's amazing how sometimes the thing you're most afraid of, like public speaking in her case, can be the very thing that helps you improve.
Yeah, it was a total transformation. By the time she got to high school, she was actually looking forward to giving presentations. It's crazy to think about where she started and where she ended up.
That's an incredible journey. And I think it highlights an important point that improvement doesn't have to follow the same path for everyone. What worked for me, pausing, recording myself, reading out loud, might not have been enough for Emily. But drama and acting gave her a way to build her fluency in a way that felt right for her.
Exactly. There's no one size fits all approach to improving fluency. You have to find what works for you, whether it's practicing solo like you did, or getting involved in something like drama, where you can focus on communicating as someone else.
So, how is Emily doing now? Is she still involved in drama?
She actually ended up majoring in communications in college. She does a lot of public speaking now, which still blows my mind considering where she started. She's even helped other students who struggle with fluency find their voice. It's like everything came full circle.
That's so inspiring. To go from barely being able to speak in front of people to actually helping others find their voice, that's a huge journey.
It really is. And I think her story is a reminder that no matter how hard it feels in the beginning, there's always a way forward. You just have to find what works for you and keep pushing through those uncomfortable moments.
I love that. It's all about finding your path. Whether it's through acting, self practice, or coaching, there's always a way to improve.
Exactly. So, if anyone listening is struggling with their own speech fluency, remember Emily's story. Even if it feels impossible now, that doesn't mean it's permanent. You can find your voice in your own time and your own way.
And like we said earlier, it's all about progress, not perfection. You're not alone in this journey.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this episode. We hope Emily's story adds to the conversation and gives you more insight into different ways to improve fluency. And of course, if you're working on your own speech, take it one step at a time.
And we're back. Before we wrap up, I think it's important to touch on one more thing that both Emily's and my stories share, which is how much patience played a role in improving fluency. Sometimes we're in such a hurry to fix things that we forget to give ourselves the time and grace to grow.
Absolutely. Patience was key for Emily. She had to take small steps, and I think sometimes people expect immediate results. It's a process that can take months, even years, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, I remember feeling so frustrated at times, like I wasn't improving fast enough. But the truth is, every small bit of progress builds up over time, even if you don't notice it in the moment.
Exactly. And another thing that helped Emily was having a support system around her. It's something we didn't talk about earlier, but the people in your life can make a huge difference. Whether it's friends, family, or teachers, having people who encourage you without putting pressure on you is crucial.
Definitely. I think when you're going through something like this, having even one person who believes in you can make all the difference. For me, it was a close friend who would practice conversations with me, let me stumble over words, and never make me feel embarrassed about it.
That's so important. Emily had her drama teacher who really became a mentor to her. The teacher created this environment where it was okay to mess up, and that gave Emily the freedom to experiment with her speech. When there's no fear of judgment, you're more likely to take risks and push through those tough moments.
Exactly. It's almost like you have to rewire your brain to not associate speaking with failure, and that takes time and patience. I've met people who've been told their whole lives that they need to hurry up or speak faster, which just reinforces that fear. But when you surround yourself with the right people, that negative loop starts to break.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the pressure comes from external expectations, and it can be overwhelming when people are constantly telling you to just spit it out. It's important to understand that those comments usually come from a place of misunderstanding, not malice.
Exactly. People mean well, but they don't realize how much it can affect someone who's struggling. It's not just about what you say, it's how you say it and how you feel while saying it.
That's a great way to put it. I think another thing that helped Emily, and this might resonate with others, is finding a purpose behind improving fluency. For her, it wasn't just about overcoming her fears, it was about being able to connect with people. She really wanted to express her thoughts and ideas, and once she focused on that goal, the process of improving fluency became more meaningful.
Yeah, having a purpose can definitely change the whole approach. For me, I just wanted to feel heard. There were so many things I wanted to share, but my speech made me feel invisible at times. Once I realized that fluency was the bridge between my thoughts and other people, it became less about fixing myself and more about making sure my voice matched my ideas.
That's such an empowering mindset shift. It's about reframing the journey, right? Instead of seeing fluency as this barrier or something that's wrong with you, it becomes something that enhances your ability to communicate.
Exactly, and I think anyone who's struggling with fluency can benefit from finding that purpose. Whether it's being able to connect better with friends, succeed in school or work, or just feeling more confident in everyday conversations, when you have that focus, the process of improving becomes a lot more rewarding.
Right. It's not just about perfecting the technical aspects of speech, like enunciation or pacing, but also about the bigger picture. Why do you want to improve, and how is it going to change your life?
Totally. And that's another thing we haven't touched on, celebrating the small victories. Like, when I was working on my speech, I'd get really down on myself for still stumbling over certain words. But what I didn't realize at the time was how far I'd already come. The fact that I was even trying was a victory in itself.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to overlook those little milestones because we're focused on the end goal. But each step matters. I remember Emily had this big moment in her drama class where she delivered a line perfectly for the first time. It was just one line, but for her, it was huge. We all celebrated like she'd won an Oscar.
And that's how it should be. Every step forward is worth celebrating. Whether it's getting through a conversation without panicking, delivering a speech, or just feeling more comfortable speaking in public, it all adds up.
Exactly. I think that's the message we want to leave everyone with today. Progress isn't always dramatic or immediate, but it's always there, even in the smallest moments. And if you're patient with yourself, surround yourself with support, and keep focusing on your goal, you'll get there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a journey, but one that's definitely worth taking. If you're listening right now and you're struggling with fluency, know that it's okay to take your time and it's okay to stumble. You'll get there.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are people who want to help, and there are tools and techniques out there that can make a huge difference. Keep going, because your voice matters.
That's right. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and we really hope this conversation helps you wherever you are in your journey.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions or stories you want to share with us, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep finding your voice.